Been looking forward to today's PPP. Matt Bertone and Mike Munster of the NC State Plant Disease and Insect Clinic will diagnose plant problems from photos submitted by you, Extension Master Gardener volunteers and Extension professionals. Then Matt and Mike are going to cover our BOLOs, or the plant pests and diseases to be on the lookout for. To wrap it up, we're going to hear from Charlotte Glen, Program Manager for the statewide Extension Master Gardener Program, who's going to present Plant These for Pollinators, along with a couple helpful program announcements. And a bit of a teaser before Charlotte presents, check out this photo of ornamental oregano taken by Debbie Roos at the Pollinator Paradise Demo Garden. Many of you know that Debbie is the ag agent at the NC Cooperative Extension of Chatham County. Debbie created this demo garden in 2008 at Chatham Mills in Pittsburgh to provide forage for pollinators. So 85% of these plants in the pollinator paradise are native to North Carolina, but as you can see here, pollinators like this adorable one still are enjoying the exotic ornamental herb. Now I'll hand it over to Matt and Mike, who are ready or ready enough to diagnose your plant problems using your photos.
All right. Thanks, Ariyah. Can everyone hear me? It looks like I'm coming through. And Mike, you all ready?
All set. Can you hear me?
I can. Great.
Transmitting for the first time from the Plantagon, one of the so-called phone booths here at the new installations.
Yep. We're this is I just set up in my new office too, so this is kind of with my old system. So yeah. Okay, well, thank you all for submitting your photos. There were a lot of great photos, and I will say that we're going to be commenting on obviously both the issues, the things that we see in the photos, but also we're going to make some comments about the photos and what might be better. And so, don't take it personally. We just need the best photos possible, and sometimes it's either the quality or the types of photos that are necessary to kind of send us to get a better answer. And Mike, do you want to have anything else to say?
Yes, and also please don't take it personally if we don't spend as much time on your particular pictures as someone else's. I don't even know who the submissions were from. Matt formatted everything, and it's just that there are some things that we're able to say more about and other things not, and time is of the essence with so many submissions.
Yeah. All right. And with that, we'll go to the first. Go ahead.
Yes, we will not be talking about management or control or anything like that. We will be talking about the diagnosis, if we can get it, or what sorts of things to look for that would lead you toward a diagnosis or help narrow things down, but not about control.
Yep. And as always, you can look up whatever the creature or disease is and NC State University, and you can often find a fact sheet with all that information in it. And of course, we can consult with others. But without further ado, let's get started. So first one. So we have a weeping cherry from Wake County. It says 3 weeks ago, I pruned my weeping cherry tree. Its branches were dragging on the ground. I have since noticed the leaves have been eaten and stripped from the branches. The branches have been losing the leaves, and the leaves are chewed or appear to be chewed on. So I'm going to say that I don't see a lot of what the chewing is on here. I did notice that there were a lot of yellow leaves. I'm wondering if there's some leaf drop, but also in this case, I would have loved to have seen the specific cases of chewing. We see a little bit of chewing here, some very superficial, but I don't know of any insects that would strip cherries of their leaves entirely, especially the whole petiole and everything like that. So I'm a little curious about more of the symptoms on this one, and I'll let Mike chime in on anything else that he sees.
Right. The yellowing also caught my eye. And one of the things you want to look for in these cases is whether or not the cambium is alive in those branches. It looks like there's a lot of life in them still, so that it was the leaves that fell off rather than actual dieback. So that's one thing to look for. Now, if we had seen the following, Matt, if you can advance the slide there. If you had seen something like this, then we'd have a really good idea of what was happening. It's very common this time of year on our ornamental cherries to see shot hole. And you'll notice that they first develop as leaf spots, and then the spots drop out. It's a reaction, a defense reaction by the prunus, but unfortunately can also lead to yellowing and a lot of defoliation. So in the area where I live, there are a lot of these ornamental cherries that are basically bare in September. There are a couple of possible causes. Most commonly, I would say one of the other of these two fungi, the Blumeriella or the Pachylaris circumcissa. But we didn't see really evidence of that in your photograph, so it's hard to say.
All right, so we have a Quercus virginiana live oak from Pender County, plant with insect problem. June 2025, first noticed galls after thinking the tree hadn't leafed out as normal. So yes, these are galls. They're not a scale insect or anything like this. And this is the galls of a gall wasp. And it's specific to live oaks. And so this is Disholcaspis Quercus virens. And this is one of the stages of this, one of the cycles of this wasp. The wasp would look something like this, would inject its eggs into the twigs. It causes this growth. And one interesting thing about this species of gall is that it does produce honeydew. So it'll start to get a little sticky secretions on it, and this attracts ants and wasps and flies and things like that that will often protect the galls from attackers, things that might parasitize the gall inhabitants. And so these typically don't harm the trees. They're native. They feed on the trees, and it variably you'll have different years will have different variations. I did find a paper on some methods of control, but typically we don't recommend control for gall wasps on oaks. Okay, and we'll move on to the next one.
So a potted cryptomeria from Forsyth County, and this is, of course, a wilting type symptom that would lead us to suspect something down in the root system, probably some kind of a root decay. And I'll talk a little bit later in another slide of how you would look to see if you do have root rot. Another consideration would be the fact that it's in a pot, and you want to make sure that there's actually drainage holes, because not all of these ornamental type planting containers have drainage. So this one we would have to have exploration of the roots and probably some laboratory testing to really know what was going on, but likely it's down there.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
So this one had a couple of different hosts, and I've split the pictures up into two different slides here. The first photo here is of the southern magnolia, and then on the next slide I'll have the buckeye. Excuse me. So problem described as several branches develop dead leaves, while other branches on the same plant are normal. That's a good observation to make. In the case of the buckeye, it's the smallest of 3 buckeyes planted in 2018. And it's really hard to say what's going on here. We seldom see any serious problems disease-wise on our southern magnolia. Sometimes there can be some branch tip dieback caused by one of Matt's friends, the black twig borer, but this looks a little bit more extensive than that. It's really hard to say. Another thing, of course, that gets your attention in this photograph is the amount of shade there. So there may be something going on there as well, but that's hard to say that that's really what's causing individual branches to die like that. And I'll talk later about what we look for in terms of cankers on woody plants, but this one's really hard to say with this particular host that's usually pretty disease-free. If you go to the next one, Matt's driving the slides here today. So here is the buckeye, and you notice these individual branches that have flagged, and there are others that are still alive. So that's in a sense a good sign, because you wouldn't suspect a root disease when you've got a nice full shrub like shown in the insert here. These have apparently been dead a long time. You can see when I zoomed in on it, you could see that some of the bark is actually sloughed off of the ends of those branches. So hopefully this is something that is going to be able to be pruned out and going into clean wood, of course. So hard to say exactly, but those are some of the ideas. This next one is a kind of a head scratcher. I grow this plant too, or one very similar to it, in our kind of perennial-ish garden in around our bird bath. And it seems like it'll die out in patches at times and then come back. I don't know if it's heat related, because it is a plant that likes things cooler. I wouldn't suspect something like a fusarium stem rot, which we sometimes see on this plant in the nursery, because you would get the stem dying out to the tip in that case, instead of just the basal leaves drying like this. So again, it's hard to say. My first guess would be abiotic, but I can't really say for sure.
All right, so we have coffee Arabica grown in a high tunnel there on a in Durham County. So not sure which for a disease or a critter, but ChatGPT and Plant App suspected larvae. We have a lot to say about AI probably diagnoses and things like that. But basically dry spots on leaves popping up suddenly across a dozen or more mature plants outside under shade and black I have I have temp, humidity, dew point, and vapor pressure. So, and all that information is probably not necessary for this. So the first thing I would say is the photos are much too unclear for us to see the details. This is very pixelated. So this is one where we'd want bigger, more clear photos. I would also want very close-up photos, or not super close-up, but showing this whole kind of lesion, which looks like actually removed tissue. But again, it's very difficult for us to see the edges, see whether it's collapsed tissue, whether it's chewed out. And I suspect it is some surface feeding organism. It could be beetles, it could be caterpillars, it could be slugs or things like that. But unfortunately, if you go out in the middle of the day, sometimes you won't see these things. So this is one where I would suggest better quality photos, close-ups of those damage, and I would suggest scouting at different times of day and at night to look for the culprits, because once you get the culprit, it's very easy to make the identification, of course. But also, I'm not sure how well coffee grows around here, but I don't think these symptoms are not something that I would suspect from it being poorly growing at this moment. So, but again, this one will be better to look for culprits at different times of day, or provide some closer ups so we can at least tell what kind of damage this is. And there's a lot of variation in a lot of these photos too. So. All right, so we got a Verbena canadensis, which may be Verbena still, maybe not. Mike wants maybe we could talk about this later. But it's looking really bad. What is this insect that is eating this plant? How to get rid of it? Black spots, holes in leaves, dying leaves. Started back in July. Now, I wouldn't suspect that there would be holes in leaves from this pest, but luckily, the clues and the symptoms are very characteristic of a type of pest. So we actually see probably a shed skin, maybe a dried out nymph, very spiky critter. All this mess of fecal matter, all the stippling and that damage is very characteristic of lace bugs. And so I actually did receive from the master gardener some specimens. It turns out to be Teleonemia nigrina, which is known from this host. But I showed pictures of Teleonemia scrupulosa here, which is a very close relative that feeds on lantana, another close related plant, and it will cause similar symptoms in heavy infestation. So oftentimes lace bugs vary year to year, but they also can vary on where the plants are planted. So sometimes the lace bugs are happier in certain situations on the plants than others. This causes much more widespread damage. This is one that if the plants survive and all that stuff, and you want to make sure next year, I would say to scout under the leaves for their activity for the young, the nymphs right here, these very spiky nymphs, and start treating then, and definitely make sure to hit the undersides of the leaves because that's where they're going to be present. But otherwise, this is a fairly straightforward diagnosis, knowing the host and the types of symptoms you're seeing there.
So Matt, I don't know if you saw that comment flash up about whether lace bugs and leaf miners are the same thing.
No, they are not the same thing. Leaf miners are never bugs. So bugs, lace bugs are a true bug. They've got sucking mouth parts. They feed on the contents of the tissue, and that's why you get the stippling, and they produce a lot of that fecal matter. A leaf miner, which I don't know on this host, is a whole group of types of insects that will feed. They're chewing insects that feed inside the leaf. So those are different things.
I remember being fooled by, this was in Mexico, being fooled by leaf miner on lantana, thinking it was some kind of a leaf spot.
Interesting. I don't know that what will be on Lantana, but that would be interesting. I'd have to look that one up. So, but yep, very typical lace bugs on this host. Very heavy damage too, so it almost looks like a disease or something at that point. But finding the specimens is pretty straightforward because they're going to be very abundant in this type of situation. And in fact, you can almost see right here in this part of the photo, you can see a lot of different shed skins and probably individual insects. And even just the one leaf that was submitted to me had a half a dozen individuals on it. So. And speaking of individuals, and lots of them on a plant, so we have this indoor monstera, and was asking and saw photos online. Tiny white pest, maybe thrips larvae, no webbing or honeydew present, and appears to be causing the yellowing. I would suggest that that is true. So you can see that the critters here, it's a little too zoomed out to tell. This is one where you might want to take a photo up close with the hand lens in front of the camera lens. But honestly, there's really not much that would be mistaken for these. If these are moving and it wasn't just debris, you got this diffuse yellow pattern where they are. This is very typical of thrips as suspected. And so these would be what they look like up close, the larvae, the young, which I suspect many of these are, but also the adults here with the wings. And so they would cause that type of damage, although I'm not seeing a lot of fecal material everywhere. So this is one, again, I would really highly suspect that's thrips, but who knows? I could be tricked because it's zoomed out and these could be little bits of debris or something. But I'm going to assume based on the symptoms and the person's observations that these are in fact thrips.
The stunned silence here is because neither Matt nor I want to necessarily take this one on. Well, the Echinacea, of course, which we talked about just this year as a featured plant, and the question of whether this is normal or the start of disease. Flower petals sticking out of the cone head. So the first thing we would wonder is, are they actually attached there and they, integrated into that flower head, or are they somehow, just laying on there? But the one thing we can say is that it does not correspond to either the aster yellow's phytoplasma, which causes either the greening of the tissue or flower petal, I'm sorry, leaf-like structures instead of floral structures. Nor does it look like the damage from the, help me out, Matt, the
Yeah,
Echinacea coneflower mite.
coneflower rosette gall or rosette mite, gall mite or something. Yeah, those are typically the spikes are going to be very much more thickened and not kind of protruding out as much. Like these are strange because they're kind of protruding out and flopped over a little bit. It's just very strange. This is one that I'd like to see in person to kind of dissect it and see what's going on there. Whether these are just kind of pulled out a little bit, whether they're growing like that. It just doesn't seem typical for the mite, and definitely not for the aster yellows, I would say. So, and I don't know if I see another one over here, but yeah, that's a strange one. Okay, let me see if I can move on. Okay.
So a Begonia grandis, I am not familiar with this plant. It's interesting that there's a begonia that's hardy here. And if we go right ahead to the next slide, some good photographs there. The good idea of turning the leaf over, and let's see what's on the underside, and then another with not quite a close-up, but somewhat close. And we can see that there are definite leaf spots here. Begonia in general in the greenhouse will get a bacterial leaf spot. I'm hesitant to say that's what's going on here, though. It doesn't look quite right. It looks maybe more fungal, but this is all just speculation. This is a case where I would need a physical sample to know what's going on and to even know if it was a primary pathogen or something secondary on a plant that was stressed in this part of the clump. So not much I could say based on the photos here. A red twig dogwood, so Cornocericea from Durham County, and the comment was that one of 7 plants showing dieback after the heavy rains, spring and summer, eventually losing its leaves. And this was really good. kudos to the submitter here for having dug it up and examined the roots to see what was going on there. And interestingly, the roots looked healthy, and then the master gardener replanted this, or agent. I'm not even sure who entered these, like I said. But things are continuing to look bad. Now, several things I want to mention here. One is that these symptoms are more of, if you look at the close-ups, a wilting or stress type symptom. Matt wondered if bacterial leaf scorch gets on this host, and I'm not aware of it, but I didn't look it up. But it does look like more of a wilting stress kind of problem, not a leaf disease. If we can eliminate then the possibility that there's root rot going on, then the suspicion would be some kind of a canker disease that's killing the stems at the very base. Excuse me. And go ahead to the next slide, please. In fact, there is one. Here is, I believe it's also red twig dogwood from here on campus. Well, I say here on campus, we're not over in Gardner Hall anymore, but on North Campus, with some definite dieback that occurred in where I was able to confirm Botrytis canker. So this can happen on this host, but there's another important factor here. So if we go to the next slide and you look up in the NC Extension Gardener Plant Toolbox, excuse me, you'll notice that for Cornoceracea, the plant hardiness zones extend up to 7B. And the submission was from Durham County, most of which is now in zone 8A. So I think you've got a plant that's probably not terribly happy in the heat of the summer, and you take stress, take some kind of injury perhaps on a plant that or woody plant, excuse me, add a fungus like a Botrytis, and you can have canker starting. So it's kind of, I don't want to say opportunistic, but almost an opportunistic situation where a canker fungus will take advantage of a plant that's either injured or under some kind of stress. So I would, on this particular case, suggest that you may have a combination of factors going on. The question that you asked at the end there, will they all eventually die? That's hard to say. If you find that the location that you've got them in maybe isn't ideal, and you can move one or two of them to a place that's a little bit more amenable to this species, then that might be a way to go as well. If you can definitely confirm that you don't have any kind of root rot going on. But once the base of those stems is killed by a canker, then that's going to be difficult for that particular one. So I would not give any kind of hope for recovery of the one that had already apparently died.
And Mike, there was a quick question about what should you do about cankers?
Well, I will mention that on the next one, actually.
Okay.
We deliberately put these one after the other because of the similarity of the situation. So here it's not a question of adaptation so much, but maybe some other stresses, but very clear necrotic or dead lesions on the woody parts of the stem, and that the leaves are dying from that point outward. Although you do see some, it's hard to tell in the photograph where those living leaves are coming from. So this is definitely a canker disease. Go ahead, Matt, and click the clicker once. I think I had a piece of text there. Yep. So this is definitely a canker, likely either of these two fungi, Botrytis or Neophusicocum, which you can't really tell apart, or else a Phomopsis. But again, the question of what might the stress factors be that predispose this plant to the canker. And click again, if you would, Matt. One of the things that we see at the bottom of the photograph here, and we always ask to see the base of a tree. Now, you were limited to 3 photographs, but when we're getting image samples, we always ask, excuse me, for the base. For the base of the trunk, so we can see what things look like there. In this case, what we happen to see is that this plant is potted. So it could be that it has become pot bound over the years. It is quite large. It's also rather leggy. It's hard to tell in the photo how much sun this might be getting, but a couple of possible stress factors. Now the question, what to do about it? In this case, you want to try and prune these out. And if you go below not just below the dead area, but into several inches into clean wood, which you may have to actually look under the bark to see how far down the discoloration goes. And of course, always to a node and following your good pruning practices. That would be the general way to address a canker. And of course, trying to address whatever kind of stress that might be causing the plant to be predisposed, stresses and injuries. So, American beautyberry, excuse me. I have 3 American beautyberry bushes planted fall of 2023, part of a pollinator garden. This year I noticed disease leaves. Should I be concerned? Should I cut them back? What is the pathogen? So in this case, you are correct that this is a mosaic symptom. That's what we would call it. And that typically tends us to think about viruses. We have had several cases like this in central North Carolina, and I believe there are cases from other states as well. When we have tested them, they've been negative for the kind of traditional virus on beautyberry, which is cucumber mosaic virus. And it is likely that this is, drum roll, one or two Amaraviruses. So that is the group of viruses that includes rose rosette, and they are thrips, they are transmitted by Ariyah mites, not thrips, Ariyah mites. This is something that's still being studied and explored as to exactly what, so there's no actual description of these. I did see a title on the description of a project looking into this by someone with USDA, something about 2 different viruses in beautyberry in this group. So that is likely what's going on. And since these are systemic in the plant, cutting them back will not help. That will be circulating throughout the whole system, and the new foliage that grows back will also be infected. So almost certainly, unless you got lucky and happened to get it really, really early. But this is not easy to do with rose rosette where we know what's going on. And here really it's kind of an unstudied situation. So that's unlikely to help. It will be infected for the rest of its life, and you can expect these symptoms to recur each year. So it'll be interesting to see how much this affects flower and berry production as well, which is of course the main attraction of this plant. All right, another one that neither one of us wants to talk about. Matt, I'll let you
Yeah,
go ahead on
okay.
this one.
I could talk about it, yeah. So elderberry, we've got with the suspected disease, spring after the leaves grew in from winter. I treated with copper fungicide. It did not work, so I cut the plant back all the way, treated with copper fungicide, and used a very small amount of chicken poo fertilizer. Leaves have grown back, and the same issues is occurring. So okay, so basically there might have a couple of things going on here. I don't know of many critters that affect elderberry like this. There is a borer of elderberry. It produces a really beautiful longhorn beetle. It's a native species. The larvae can bore into the base, but I doubt that that's what's going on here. Although right here, these symptoms to the right, me and Mike discussed this very diffuse intraveinal chlorosis is probably some kind of nutritional issue or something else that's going on there. These yellow spots here, we're not sure. An up close photo of the upper and underside of that spot would have been really good to detect if there's anything physically there or any signs or symptoms of something. But the other thing too is that elderberries get a ton of viruses as well. And maybe Mike can elaborate on that.
11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Something like 20 or 21 viruses
my
are
gosh.
reported on Sambucus. Now, not all of them necessarily cause symptoms, but yes, it is quite prone. Yeah, either way, a fungicide wouldn't be expected to have any kind of benefit here. Possibly a soil test might be good to make sure that you're optimizing the fertility, but other than that, I would take a wait and see on this. It's kind of an attractive plant there.
Mhm.
I don't know if it will outgrow that corner. That's another consideration.
Yeah, Mike, I just realized the tips up here at the top of the canopy look much more chlorotic, and I'm wondering if that's where a lot of this is happening. And maybe just, yes, nutrition would help, pruning out and then nutritional, fertilizer or something like that. But yeah, without a soil test, it's hard to know.
Yeah, and again, there are a lot of viruses in this host.
Yeah. All right, so Mojo pittosporum in Union County, plants with a disease problem. The plant was treated with fungicide spray, but eventually died and was replaced. Started to notice browning of the leaves in late fall. In early April, I noticed more browning and dead branches. Okay, so fungicide is not going to help in this situation, unfortunately, because this is not a disease. These are insects. So these are cottony scales, a pulvinaria type scale. It's a very heavy infestation, I will say, which can happen on plants, but and this species can be a fairly aggressive soft scale. Those white things that may mistake it for a fungus or something like that, and we're going to see this is a common theme for sucking insects like scales and aphids and whatnot, is that they produce the wax. These produce these wax ovisacs, which is where the eggs are laid. So the female produces this wax that kind of spreads, and basically you've got this long tail, which is where the eggs reside. And so that's why it was mistaken as a fungicide, as a fungus. That's why fungicides won't work. But one thing I would consider with this type of thing is that plants that are happier are going to be less infested by insects. And so I would wonder if this was planted in an incorrect spot, if there were just some other issues going on. This is one where you can treat for the insects, but I might also look for other evidence for stress or anything like that. But this is a fairly aggressive scale when it's not treated. I have them on my U, and you can get them on a lot of different plants. There's a couple different species out there, but the species idea is not necessary for control. But yeah, these are loaded with scale insects then.
So a fringe tree doesn't say when it was planted, but a rather small fringe tree here. Symptoms started about a month ago. Dark spots on the topmost leaves. This is a young tree which we planted. Oh, there it is. We planted this spring. So this is an interesting situation. The marginal burn there may be some kind of a stress factor, might be some kind of problem lower down. That's hard to say. But the spots themselves, the actual circular spots, are interesting. We have seen both on Osmanthus and Kyananthus a fungus that apparently has not yet been described show up over the last couple of years. But one of the big symptoms is swelling and cracking of the bark. Not quite a canker, not quite a gall, but a very dramatic bark symptom, and also dieback. There are some leaf symptoms associated with that, though. So I would be curious if this was the round spots here were that it doesn't look quite right from the osmanthus case I'm thinking of, but this is one where a physical sample would be needed to really get to the bottom of it.
Are you interested in having one, Mike?
I would be interested, yes,
Okay.
in seeing this in person.
Yeah, well, I think we could waive the fee then if if whoever submitted this wants to submit it to the clinic, we'd be happy to see it, to take a look. And then,
All right. Another kind had this, and this one with a different sort of symptom, and this one is a bit of a mystery. These spots appeared mid-July. Go ahead and uh, hit the next slide because it's just an insert there. Thank you. This one, I I don't know what is going on, and tell you the truth. Again, I'm not soliciting an example of this one, but I would have to see it really to know what was going on. And also it would be nice to see the underside of these spots to see what's happening there. Yeah, I'm gonna have to beg ignorance in this particular case. Let me go back. I saw a comment or a question about the whether the beautyberry with the soil would be contaminated or not. It's probably a case like rose rosette that there is no soil persistence as long as you've got the roots out. So if the plant is not going to be able to sprout again from roots that are left, then there's really no danger of the virus also surviving. It is not a soil-borne situation.
The only thing I would add to that is I think the mites, we saw the mites on the symptomatic plants here on campus, and I think I talked to the people up at USDA, and it was also an undescribed species of mite. So, the whole mite virus plant system is fairly new and unknown, a lot of the details. So we really don't know where the mites are overwintering or what they're doing, because a lot of mites will travel down into other parts of the plant over the winter and then crawl back up on the leaves when they come out. Um, but yeah, I wouldn't suspect that they would survive super long without their host. But it might be good to just leave it for a while without a plant in that. And I don't know exactly how long a while is, but it's a big unknown, unfortunately, right now. All right, let's go. Next one. What do we got? All right.
So Matt, if you want to comment about the photography first.
Yes, so I did expand these a bit, but these are very small, very pixelated images. And while we are pretty good with a lot of things, and I think Mike has some answers. We would definitely have preferred much clearer photos. I would definitely suggest, if you're not able to get the photos you want on your hardware that you have, either an older cell phone or older camera, I would definitely suggest, if you're going to do this and want to submit photos, that you invest in a good camera, or maybe adjust the settings on your devices, because this is very pixelated. It's very difficult to see, even blown up. And so, but with all that said, Mike.
Yes, and sometimes I'm glad you said that about the settings, because I don't want to malign anybody's phone or camera, but sometimes when you go to submit or email or whatever, there's a conversion to basically a thumbnail, and it comes out with very little resolution. So, and then when you try and expand it, then all you get is pixels. So that could be what went on there. But as Matt said, next, this is almost surely Cercospora leaf spot, typically smallish spots, dark with very pale centers, kind of whitish centers, ubiquitous in this big leaf hydrangea in North Carolina. So it is just something that you will have this time of year on your hydrangeas. There are a couple other things that can go on too, some sun scald, some Cornespora leaf spot, which tends to be larger blotches, but I would be very surprised if there is no Cercospora leaf spot here. As far as the material in the mulch, now that's harder to say, but I suspect it's some kind of a saprobic or saprophytic fungus is just decaying some of that mulch there, and not any kind of threat to the plants. The orange thread is not evident here in the photo, but even then I would not worry about that. I would suspect it's likely a decay type fungus that's just happens to be there in the mulch.
All right, so we got about 20 minutes until the hour or so. Maybe we should, I don't know how many we have more, but okay. So we got
Wait, if
Shasta.
you don't know, then I don't know, because
I can't remember.
you're
I can't remember how
driving.
many we have yet, but we'll keep going. We'll go a little briskly. So we've got a Shasta daisy in Pender County. What's causing the white foamy type stuff? Also found on Lantana. All right, so found on a couple different hosts. This guy suggests probably not a disease. I will say again, commenting about the photos, this is another thing to please look out for. So your camera often wants to focus on the background, which is the most of what's there, and then at the expense of focusing on the actual thing you want to focus on. So again, although I can tell you what this is almost certainly or should be, it's more preferential to have the clear photo in the front. So what happens is, again, it wants to focus on the background. So what you can do is put your hand behind this or a sheet of paper, make it focus on the flower first, and then snap the photo. You really want to be careful and getting the thing that you are interested in focus. But that being said, this is almost certainly going to be plant hopper nymphs, flatted plant hopper nymphs. These young bugs create this wax around them, and you will see the bug in there when they're active, but the wax still persists after the bugs have molted and grown up to be adults like this that also have a little bit of a mealy wax on them. Now, I should mention going back that the flower head is kind of dead here, but I don't suspect that they'd be doing that specific damage. Now, if there are a lot of them on a plant, they can maybe cause some damage, but we don't typically think of these plant hoppers as being damaging. They can also be just sprayed off with a hose or whatnot, and early scouting can reveal that. But I do see them on my lantana as well. So that's why, all these clues going together that this is almost certainly going to be the flatted plant hopper nymphs feeding on the stems of these herbaceous plants. And now we have a persimmon, Diospyros, and on New Hanover County, this is a 2 to 3 year old native persimmon with raised pimple-like dots on the leaves. Don't know if it's an insect or a disease problem. I did not see any insects on this tree. I noticed these 2 months ago, but it is definitely spreading. Okay, so whenever you see growths like pimple-like growths or galls on plants, I would definitely suggest going to gallformers.org. And maybe Charlotte can throw that in the chat. It's a really great new resource to identify all sorts of galls, including fungal, all the way through insect and other galls. And little pimple-like galls on a host are oftentimes going to be caused by Ariyah mites, and in fact, that's the case in this, or that's what's happening in this case. So, Asaria theospirae is the cause of this. These are microscopic mites. So this is why you wouldn't see the insect, and it's not an insect either, it's a mite. They're basically, what you could do is, if you have a high power lens or scope, you can dissect, use a scalpel to cut open these galls and look inside, and you'll see little worm-like mites inside. There are lots of different plants that get these different mites, but each plant typically has its own species. And so if you would search on, and this is a screenshot from that gallformers.org page, I just searched, if you just search the genus or persimmon, it'll give you a list of the different things that cause galls, and there aren't that many things that cause galls on persimmon. So it'd be pretty quick to find out that this is actually a mite gall. And luckily, it won't kill the plant. It's a native mite. It's a native plant. It won't kill the plant, and you may have fewer incidents next year. But we'd have to look at some other kind of information on how to manage these mites well. But they shouldn't kill the plant, and it just makes it look kind of funky. Okay, I'm not talking Mike either.
Yeah, me neither. So, lilac, Miss Kim from the mountains, Buncombe County, and with wilting, you can see this sort of purpling as well. Discouraging that another plant that did this last year had died. It left behind a baby, which is nearby the plant suffering this year. So I was curious about that phrase, whether the baby, so to speak, was uh, a root sprout, or what exactly it was, in which case you would kind of wonder what had done the deed in the first place. So this is one that we would need. Clearly, it's not a foliar disease. We'd need to see what's going on at the base of the main stem here and in the roots to be able to diagnose this one.
All right, so we've got an insect to be identified, wondering what pollinator this is and how to attract. Well, it's already attracted because it's at the flower. and it's feeding on the pollen and nectar. This is a fly. This is a hover fly, and I'll show you one of my photos of a mating pair of Toxomerus marginatus. So there's several species of Toxomerus that go on to flowers and on plants, and they're going to go there for a couple reasons. You can actually see that the one back here is a female. It's got a wide separation between the eyes. The male on top here has the the eyes with the narrow strip between them, and the female with the wider. That's often in flies how you can tell the difference between males and females. But this insect actually is dual purpose. So it will come to flowers. It's a pollinator per se. It's not really, it's not like bees where they're actively transferring pollen and things like that. But it will pollinate. But the other thing that's great about this group is that the larvae of this species feed on aphids. They're little maggots that crawl around. They're colorful little maggots that crawl around on plants and feed on the aphids. So these insects are very interested in lots of different plants, especially if they have aphids, but also if they have pollen and nectar.
So a Prunus lorcerasus, a cherry laurel, skip laurel in this case, from Cabarrus County. Now, here we have a case where the description is helpful. There were 5 shrubs that were planted about 5 years ago, and one of them, although it had been the healthiest, has been declining in the last few weeks, showing signs of severe stress, while the others are not. So the symptoms here, the overall wilting of the whole plant, the fact that it's just one, this strongly suggests some kind of a root rot. Now, see the comment here that the soil was not excessively dry, but also not moist. So we watered, and of course the water didn't help. And that makes sense too, because if the roots were compromised, and oftentimes the stress of the hot, dry weather will trigger the symptoms, but the actual decay, the loss of root function took place quite a while back. Now, the submitter did suspect a root rot, possibly Phytophthora. I would concur with that. The 2 things you want to determine, though, are number 1, do you have root rot? And that is why I tossed in this next slide, which I use in training for the pull test of how to determine whether you've got root rot, since they are often dark in color for trees and shrubs. So the idea is that you pull on that root and see, will the outer portion break off and slide against the harder, tougher vascular bundle at the center, kind of like a bead on a wire. Then you know that you have got root rot, versus a root that either resists breaking at all or snaps cleanly. So I would suggest doing that test, and then I would suggest looking for armillaria, although Phytophthora is a good thought. Can't rule out armillaria as a possibility. Those are 5 years planted, and that 2, 3, 4, maybe 5-year window is kind of an ideal one for armillaria to show up. And I will mention that in the BOLOs of how you can look for that. The Phytophthora would require a laboratory test to confirm.
All right, so we have a Shasta daisy in Wake County in a pot. Plant disease is my best guess. Started showing distress in the summer, about 2 weeks earlier than the picture was taken, and continue to get worse. Uniform distribution, all this stuff. Okay, so a couple things are going on here. Mike is going to let me take over on this one because unfortunately, I would say it would be better to have some close-ups of the damage and the undersides of the leaves. That's because there's a lace bug that's on asters and the chrysanthemum lace bug. This looks a lot like that damage that was on the verbena earlier, and so I suspect there might be lace bugs here causing that yellowing and the stippling and all that stuff. But there are other couple issues like the loss of the leaves and the legginess and all that stuff. So it's really difficult to tell what else could be going on with this plant. It's in a pot, so there are other kinds of considerations. And Mike, I don't know if you want to chime in on anything else.
Yes, the kind of dark margins to some of those lower leaves suggest that there may be some kind of stress going on there. Root problem, maybe, especially if the pot isn't draining well. Hard to say. I kind of would be disinclined to think any kind of a crown rot. this plant does get, well, you know, I don't want to go
Well,
there. We're not going to go
well,
there.
we're not gonna go
I,
there because this plant is not this plant apparently because Scott Zona just chimed in. Thankfully, he's on the call for the plant as a plant expert. He says this is Nipponanthemum nipponicum, so which don't know. Montauk daisy. Okay, well, it's at least still daisy, so it's still an aster, so it could still get attacked by lace bugs. I was having trouble. I don't know Shasta daisy well, so I was looking it up and wasn't sure exactly what this was, but again, as long as it was some kind of daisy or an aster, then the lace bugs, the chrysanthemum lace bug is probably could be one. But again, I think closer ups, much more, undersides of leaves, things like that would definitely help in this situation. And I'm sure some soil and root testing and things like that would also well help. So
yeah, and I'm not a horticulturist, but maybe a repotting, maybe a cutting back when it goes dormant. It does seem to be a little long in the tooth there
mhm.
for that pot.
Okay, got a few more. We got about 9 minutes, 10 minutes. So Mike, you want to do
All
quick
right.
on this one?
Yeah, my reaction to this one is, oh, please no. I had one time I remember got a moss sample submitted and really struggled with it. It was someone who's actually, I think, selling the mosses. Really struggled to figure out what was going on and had a hard time. So there are some very different kinds of pathogens that will cause the death of patches of moss, things that are not the ones that we're used to using or used to dealing with, excuse me, in our vascular plants. So this could be something like that. It could also just be that something spilled there and killed these spots. One of the clues would be, are they enlarging over time or not? So yeah, this is one that I would have to take a pass on.
All right, so we have a rhododendron damage, maybe by an insect, egg-laying damage. Should I be concerned about it? Photo show damage, pencil-sized stem of hybrid azalea. On the bottom of the stem, foliage on the tip of the stem looks healthy and normal. That's great because it, as suspected, and this is Orange County, so this would be where the periodical cicadas would have been. So this is fairly classic cicada damage. You get this split kind of where they are ovipositing. The females have a long needle-like ovipositor. They saw into the stems. They do often hang upside down to do that, which would make sense. If you saw kind of just cracking without these kind of filaments or these kind of fraying coming out, you could, and scattered, you might think it was hail damage on the top of them, but since it's on the underside, it's got this frayed kind of wood coming out where they have kind of sawed into. That's a very typical of cicada oviposition damage. Now, the good thing is that many plants will heal well from it, and it's good that it sounds like it's still green, and eventually it'll grow over, and unless you cut into the wood, you wouldn't really know that there was damage there. So, but there's also probably going to be some babies coming out of there. They may emerge, but this would have been from last year's brood, I think, and I forget if that was, I think that was a 13 or I think it was a 13-year brood. So either 13 or 17 years from now, you might see more cicadas there. Now we have,
Not
oh,
that you can't get flagging if you get
yes,
enough damage.
exactly. Yeah, definitely look at, they can break, you can have the death, the apical death of that if they've kind of damaged it enough. But just keep an eye out and look and just prune it out. If not, it's not gonna harm it overall for forever, basically. Now, we have muley grass on the coast in Carteret County. This fuzzy stuff on muley grass. Notice this was an insect and not a disease, and that's very good observation. So you can see these little crawlers here and this little fluff with an insect in there. And this is a very common pest of muley grass on the coast, and it is a mealy bug called Stomatomeryx acircula. So the muley grass mealy bug. The wax that comes out of them is very tendril-like. It looks, I think it looks kind of like that famous photo of Albert Einstein with the crazy hair. But these are very common pests of muley grass and on the coast.
So a button bush with general decline, wilt, and yellowing of leaves, planted in April of this year. There was a suggestion here that because the soil was very heavy, that maybe it was too wet there. A little hard to think that it might be overly wet for a plant that usually in nature you're seeing on the margins of lakes. But I would wonder with that kind of general yellowing, whether there could be some kind of soil nutrient problem. So a soil nutrient test, of course, the stress of being planted in April, just as the heat was coming on, may have had something to do. I don't know. That's just toss that out there. But yeah, you would want to know what the roots look like here, and you want to know what your soil test results are to kind of get a better angle on this. Also, it looks like there's a lot of sawdust. I'm seeing it now, kind of, or well, maybe that's just the shredded bark mulch, but that mulch layer looks a little bit thick too, although it seems to be not actually abutting against the base of the plant. So that's good to have that zone of no mulch right around the immediate base, at least not thick.
Okay. I think. Okay, so we've got a paper wasp here to identify what the wasp has in its mouth on the tailgate of my car. I think it nests in there. It could possibly nest inside the tailgate, but maybe not. I'm not sure. It'd have to have a bit of a space in there. So if it was going inside with this, then maybe. But what we're talking about here is what's in the mouth, and it's chewed up prey and likely a caterpillar. It's very common prey for paper wasps, hornets, and yellow jackets. What they do is they sting it, kill it. They basically chew it up into a ball of meat and then bring it back and feed it to the larvae in the nest. And the larvae have chewing mouth parts. They're able to feed on the solid foods. And that's also why paper wasps are often very beneficial in that they go patrol your plants and eat caterpillars and stuff. So, okay.
So here's a goldenrod from Wake County with this deformed growth that showed up in late April or early May, thickening of the leaves, general decline, some yellowing of new growth. Other than the thickening part, and helped by the observation that phlox, paniculata, and coneflower were showing the same things, that is at least an inclination to think that this may have been some kind of a herbicide damage, the deformation and the chlorosis there in the growing points. The downward curling of some of those older leaves is something that I would, if I just saw that, I would refer it to Matt. I have had broad mites on my own shrubbery, but this is above and beyond. So that's the best hypothesis. Also, that April-May timeframe when people are first, getting their sprayers out, there could have been some drift or something that did this. So there's some kind of record checking and questions to be asked about timing of things and what happened earlier this year that might have contributed to this. So speculation, but possibly herbicide.
All right, now I have a slide here that says extras. That's because we have now gotten through everybody who has submitted has at least one submission in there. So everything after here was people that submitted multiple things. So we'll try and get through some of these real quickly. First, Mike, another
Yeah,
golden rod.
toss it to me. That I do not know here either. I would want to know a little bit more about the plant and the history and things. Again, it could be more a soil issue than anything else. It's pretty heavy clay there, and don't know if it was amended or not, or how long it's been there. So,
Yeah.
um,
All right, and we'll probably do a lightning round now. This will be very quick. Okay, so, all right, so we got Mexican sunflower. This is an insect to be identified. I believe it's secondary screwworm fly. Is a good pollinator, just a pest? Not sure if it's a pollinator. Well, if it's on a flower and it could transmit pollen, then it is technically a pollinator. And you are correct. This is the secondary screwworm fly, Cochleomya macellaria. It is actually beneficial in that the larvae are also decomposers of carrion, of animal material. So it's basically beneficial, even though people don't like how disgusting they are. And it is related to the primary screwworm you're hearing about in the news, but it's a non. It doesn't harm animals or humans. It only feeds on dead things. Then we've got a peach. Curious what the yellow items on the bee color of the yellow stuff on the peach tree leaf. This is a very happy bee because it's covered in pollen. So must feel very successful there. Yes, that's it.
a Coosa dogwood showing kind of a wilting leaf curling symptom here. Um, watering frequently with the heat, and 2 or 3 months ago. Yeah, this one is hard to say. Again, the suspected root or soil type problem. I don't see that we know when this was planted, but oh, rats. You know what we forgot to say, Matt? We're not going
Yeah.
to flip back all those slides now, but there was that one Kyananthus where we were going to say, be sure and get that strap off of there, because there was still some of the tape that was
Yeah.
used to hold the stake to the stem, and you want to make sure that that's removed so you don't get any girdling there. And I saw someone had made a comment about, I don't know if it was specifically girdling roots or, root bound condition, that if it comes that way out of the nursery, then you definitely want to keep an eye on that. Deal with the root ball when you're planting. And if it's something that's already been planted, consider girdling roots as a possible contributing factor to decline. So yeah, this one is hard to say. And again, it's nice to have a picture of the very base. This one is a little bit easier. That very nice uniform interveinal chlorosis or yellowing of the lower leaves is strongly suggestive of a nutrient deficiency of some kind rather than any kind of a disease. So another case where a soil test might be helpful. Also be good to see what the young foliage looks like, but this one speaks of nutrient deficiency. You see that kind of thing in tomato and you immediately think magnesium deficiency. I wouldn't be able to speak to the hardy kiwi, but those are the lines that I would investigate. This one's kind of cool. So lemon balm in this nice barrel planter and a perfectly uniform spotted necrosis along the edges of those leaves. Again, speculation, but one thing that I would consider here is that this may be from the guttation fluid, that it would be expressed there out of the hydrathodes at the tips of the veins there, the secondary veins on the leaf. And if that dried down, concentrated before it got pulled back into the leaf as the day warmed up, then you can, I am told, get some kind of a burn from that. I would expect that probably more likely than an infectious disease, which of course would advance farther in any case. So that's at least a possibility here that would lead me to wonder or ask whether there might have been too much fertilizer used in this particular barrel. But anyway, just again, a couple of things to think about.
All right, so we have somebody saying I'm getting conflicting information on which butterfly this is. It is either an eastern pale clouded Coleus arati or orange sulfur Coleus erythemi. These were seen all over the garden. The picture of marigolds. All right, so I'm not a butterfly expert. I leave it to all the butterfly folks who love those things. But a couple of things to note here are that first of all, this species up here, if you get that in an AI app, always check where these species are found. Coleus arati is a European species, so we would not expect to see it here. And so actually, these are two different butterflies. And I did use a little help from AI, but also what I do is I then cross-reference everything. I always check the distributions, check all the very specific characteristics. And so we do have actually Coleus erythemi here on the right, but we have the sleepy orange Erema Nisipi. I don't know really how to pronounce these, but actually these are two different species, and you can see the subtleties. But again, I'm not a butterfly expert, and these are very difficult for me to just cite ID. But always check the distribution. You're going to get things that look similar in other parts of the world, and it is very unlikely that they're going to be here also.
Goji berry, leaves turning yellow and brown. Plant was healthy and full last summer. So yes, the only that I can recall, the only disease I've ever gotten on this plant was powdery mildew, and this doesn't look like that. There could be a little bit of a leaf spot going on, but I would wonder about soil and root situations here. So this one, based on the photographs, I wouldn't be able to say too much, but that does look like pretty heavy clay soil. On the other hand, it does look like there was some amendment that was made there too. So
All right, and finally, I think this is the last one. Union County, please identify the insect. It was on a Mexican sunflower, and I would assume it was pollinating. Flower is in a hugel. Okay, Mike, why don't you do that one?
Hugelkultur.
Okay, bed that is used to attract pollinators for the vegetables. Okay, so again, it's on a flower. It can technically be a pollinator. However, this is also a true fruit fly in the family Tephrididae, the sunflower seed maggot, Neotephritis finalis. And this species goes to the sunflowers to get some nectar and pollen, but also because with this, there's a female right here with this long ovipositor, they will lay their eggs in the flower heads and their maggots will bore into the flower heads and feed on them. They won't typically outright kill the plants. They may reduce seed production in kind of commercial settings, but they're just a native fly. They're a thing that feeds on these. They have an association with those plants, and if it's there feeding on one flower and moving to a different flower, it could technically pollinate it. So take from that what you will. And with that, I think we are done. And thank you everyone for your submissions. It was really, in general, really great photos. Maybe a couple more photos needed for a few of them. As you can tell from what Mike said, that a lot of these disease issues, especially root and soil things, are almost impossible to diagnose from the photos. But having those photos is really helpful for a lot of reasons, even if you do send in a physical sample. And so with that, me and Mike are going to very quickly go through some BOLOs, I think. And Mike, would you like to go first, or you want me to go first?
Since you've got your sharing already, go ahead.
Okay, let me bring up my BOLOs. Um, and they'll be fairly quick. All right, let's see. All right, so arthropod bolos for September. So you may be seeing soldier beetles and their larvae. They're very common. The soldier beetles are very common on flowers. They're these leathery wing. They have leathery elytra and orange and black. But what we do sometimes see are the little velvety larvae running around driveways, sidewalks, and sometimes getting into homes. And so this is the time of year you would start to see those. A number of clearwing borer moths, including the peach tree borer, are going to be more active at this time of year, laying their eggs near the trees. I will say the prunus species have a lot of other stressors going on now, but if you have a prized plant, you might want to kind of scout. Make sure if you see any of this activity of these kind of these very bluish cobalt with the orange striped moths flying around, be aware that that's the peach tree borer. This is also the time of year the caterpillars are going to be either the biggest, especially the armyworms, but also we're going to start to kind of be wondering whether we're going to have a bad year for fall armyworms in turf. And we're not sure exactly yet because they don't overwinter here. So they rely on weather systems and movement from the south. And so we're not sure exactly how bad this year is going to be yet. With all the storm systems, they may have a better chance of getting up here. But until we know more, there's no news yet. This is the time of year to remove the bagworm bags. They're going to start to tie off and pupate and before they're mating, but this is where you'd want to slice off that ring, that silk, unwrap it from the twig so it doesn't girdle it, and then dispose of the bags that are tied off now. You're going to start to see a lot more big spiders. Even though they're big in webs, they are going to be typically harmless, basically harmless. They're very skittish. They're not going to try and bite you. If you walked into a web, don't freak out. They're freaking out too. You may also start to see Joro spiders in certain parts of the state. These are going to be massive spiders making huge webs. Again, though, just because they're big and scary looking does not mean that they are a danger to you. They are basically harmless to humans, and it's just consider them completely harmless. Let's just say. You may also see other bugs getting bigger throughout the year, so you may start to see bigger wheel bugs. These are very important generalist predators that will feed on lots of different organisms, and look from afar. You don't want to pick one up because they can give you a painful jab, but they are a native, very interesting large assassin bug that we have. And of course, goldenrod and other late summer flowers are going to be attracting lots of different pollinators and insects. You'll have blue-winged wasps like this that attack scarab larvae, and you'll have blister beetles, other things like that on these plants. And so just go out, enjoy the flowers, enjoy the late season critters, and I will turn this over to Mike now.
All right. Let's see here. Just a quick few BOLOs for September. Can everybody see it? Starting with a question, I've posed this before, I believe. What do these have in common? This scorch symptom on oak and the virescence, the green coloration, and phyllity, the greenish, the leafy-like structures on the coneflower. Well, it happens that these are both caused by types of bacteria, Xylella fastidiosa in this case, and the aster yellows phytoplasma in this case. So we are now in the season where bacterial leaf scorch is going to be becoming more and more obvious on, especially on our oaks, possibly also on some other hosts, sycamore, redbud perhaps, elm, maybe even earlier. So that's something to be on the lookout for. Grapes, with called, of course, Pierce's disease in that case. With all the wet weather we've been having, it's going to be a bumper year, I expect, for the mushrooms. I'm seeing a lot of them up already, but Matt is not a butterfly expert, he says, and I am not a mushroom expert. So the conchs, the wood decay things, I'll sometimes take a crack at, but the mushrooms I call in help for. Boletes, the ones that have pores on the underside but are very soft in texture. These, well, some of them, of course, are poisonous, but the important thing is that they're not going to harm plants. These are going to be mycorrhizal. So if you see that, don't worry about your plants. And then some slime molds as well, like the stemonitis here on the left, the physarum in the center here. So some things to possibly be looking out for, as well as our tropical cyclones. Thankfully, it looks like Erin is going to not actually make landfall here. So hopefully those of you on the coast don't get affected too much. I did mention armillaria as a possibility with that cherry laurel submission, and I want to say what to look for there. We see a lot of it on arborvitae. That's not the only host, but that is our #1 host that we see it on. And what you do to diagnose it is you peel off the bark at the base of the main stem, look for that white to cream colored mat of fungal mycelium there, either on the bark side or on the wood side, in the trunk at the base, or else in the larger roots. And we'll soon be getting to the season, it's September into October, when the fungus itself, the mushrooms themselves will pop up here. So these are ones that are, it's now called Des armillaria cespitosa, are one of our causes of armillaria root rot. Other September bolos, a lot of powdery mildews on many hosts, rusts on aster and ironweed, and just weeds in general. Secondary leaf spots as the leaves are starting to senesce prior to fall. Phytophthora root rot, as well as armillaria, which you've mentioned. The star there meaning start watching for the mushrooms in clusters like that, honey-colored. Bacterial leaf scorch on, here's an example of another species of the armillaria. Bacterial leaf scorch, red oak, sycamore, redbud, talked about that. Boxwood blight could still be showing up. And when you get to your apple fruits, things like black rot and bitter rot, sooty blotch, and fly speck being the more superficial, less important type spots. Septoria leaf spot and gray leaf spot on tomato. I've seen several cases of the gray leaf spot, the stem phyllium on tomato this year. Septoria could still, of course, be around, as well as growth cracks on the tomato fruit. And if that's not enough, as always, check out our webpage. In the red menu banner on the left, the second to the last item is our Be on the Lookout by month pages.
All right. Thank you, Matt and Mike. That was phenomenal. You didn't know, but I was keeping the list of and typing out everything you covered. You covered 39 samples.
Huh.
And we've got that list that'll be part of the resource document. It's quite a challenge keeping up with you at times. So that was some very interesting samples and great lessons in ID and what's needed to ID and diagnose these problems. All right, we're going to move forward with our Plant These for Pollinators segment. And just as a reminder, this is a monthly segment we've started this season to highlight different plants that maximize pollinator habitat because they attract a lot of different types of pollinators. And our goal, or your goal, to attract lots of pollinators to your landscape and provide habitat for them would be to have at least 3 different things in bloom each season. The more would be better. So these for pollinator plants. The slides that are used to present these are available for you to review, as well as for you to use for extension programming. And the QR code and link here on the slide will take you to that archive. And we're going to start off this month's Plant These for Pollinators with a reminder that we are almost at the Great Southeast Pollinator Census. That is this Friday and Saturday, August 22nd and 23rd. Encourage everybody to participate. It's a great way to contribute to science. It's a community science project where you observe pollinator activity in your landscape on any plant where you see insects landing on it. And you download a counting sheet, and for 15 minutes you watch that plant and you make little tick marks every time an insect lands on it, even if it's the same insect landing over and over. You're not trying to count individual insects, you're counting each landing. So you can get the counting sheet and then upload your counts. So that data is available at the Great Southeast Pollinator Census website, which is gsepc.org. And the reason I start with that one is to encourage you to participate, but also because this month's Plant These for Pollinators feature plant is actually a collaboration between the Great Southeast Pollinator Census and a very similar project in the United Kingdom called the Pollinator Monitoring Scheme. Which to me, a scheme always sounds shady, but in the UK, they like to talk about projects and things as schemes. So it's not something shady, it's something excellent that is encouraging people both here in the Southeastern United States and then all across the UK to be part of community science and observing pollinators. So with our project here, with the Great Southeast Pollinator Census, that is very specific to the upcoming weekend, this Friday and Saturday. And it is for people living in Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Florida, and Alabama. Whereas the UK Pollinator Monitoring Scheme, they take a little bit of a different approach, and they ask people to observe plants over the whole season from April through September, but they have very specific plants. So they have a list of plants, and those are the only plants to monitor. And it takes place all over the United Kingdom. So these two groups got together and compared, what they were doing and shared knowledge in a field trip earlier this year. And I was really fortunate to be part of that field trip along with Amanda Bratcher, who is our coordinator for the Great Southeast Pollinator Census in North Carolina. And one of the things that came out of this trip was a collaboration between these two community science projects that we would encourage people to look at the same plant in both countries and collect data and see if we had any similarities. So the plant, we had to choose something from the UK Pollinator Monitoring Scheme plant list. There wasn't a lot on their list that would be blooming here in August, but the one thing that we found that could possibly be blooming here was oregano. So oregano is our Plant These for Pollinator plant for this month. These are probably familiar to you as culinary plants. They are culinary and ornamental perennials from Europe, North Africa, and Central Asia, particularly around the Mediterranean Sea area. They are in the mint family. If you've ever grown anything in the mint family, you know they can be very vigorous spreading plants. With oregano and many of its relatives, they do spread, but in my experience, it's always they stay in kind of a carpet. So they're spreading outward in this carpet rather than running feet away from the original plant. So that spreading carpet type habit is a little easier to control. You can pull it up and keep it in a certain space or just give it lots of space to spread. So I would not be afraid to plant them in the ground, whereas there are some other plants in the mint family you would always want to keep in containers. As mentioned, these are from the Mediterranean Sea area, so they love that Mediterranean climate, which has hot summers and hot, dry summers and cool, typically wet winters. So they grow best in full sun with well-drained soil, and they are both heat and drought tolerant. And like many plants that have herbal fragrances, they're very attractive, particularly to bees. And when my culinary oregano was in full bloom last month, and I cut it back before I realized it was going to be the plant to look at. It had all kinds of pollinators on it: small bees, large bees, honeybees, so little butterflies, skippers, those type of things. It was a hive of activity. It had kind of trailed off blooming, which is why I cut it back. So we're going to just highlight 3 potential species of the genus Oreganum. So these oreganos that you could grow in the Southeast, that could already be in your garden, that if they are, encourage you to monitor one of those for the Great Southeast Pollinator Census this weekend, so that data can be part of this collaboration with the UK pollinator scheme. So these are common oregano, which is culinary plant, sweet marjoram, another culinary plant, and the ornamental oregano, which, even though it's called ornamental oregano and typically is grown for the flowers because it blooms for a long time, it does also have edible leaves, but they just aren't favored for culinary use the way that the 2 other species are here. So common oregano is probably the most common of the oreganums we come across in the landscape, or especially in herb gardens. It is Oreganum vulgare. So this is an early to midsummer bloomer. As I mentioned, my plant had kind of finished blooming last month, so I trimmed it back. And it is come back some. There are some blooms on it, but just not the level of pollinator activity I saw last month. So you can trim them back as the flowering starts to fade off. You can deadhead them, and that'll encourage more blooming, which is a little bit counter to what we're typically doing with most of our culinary herbs, because in general, blooming reduces the flavor of the foliage, and most of our culinary herbs, we are harvesting the foliage. So you may decide you want one oregano plant that you're going to keep the flowers trimmed off because you want to have the leaves available to harvest for culinary use. And you might have another oregano plant, perhaps one of the ornamental varieties, or just a regular oregano that you let bloom as long as it will bloom for the pollinators, because they do love it. And a close relative that looks very similar that you may come across is called Greek oregano, just has a slightly different flavor. It is a subspecies of the common oregano, so it's Oreganum vulgare, subspecies hirtum. So those are very, very closely related plants. They're going to look similar and grow similar in the garden. The next one is sweet marjoram. I absolutely adore the fragrance of sweet marjoram. It's Oreganum marjorano, and it does bloom in the summer, but it is super tricky to grow. It requires absolutely exceptional drainage and neutral to alkaline soil. It's also a tender perennial, so true sweet marjoram, the species Oreganum majorano, is only hardy in zones 9 to 10 and really is best grown in containers, which is where I've seen it do best. And you may be saying, well, I've got some marjoram and it does really well. And what you may have, and what I've grown in the past and had better luck with, is called either Italian oregano or Italian marjoram. It is a hybrid between this species, the true sweet marjoram, and the culinary common oregano we were just looking at. It's Oreganum cross majoricum. And that one's a little hardier, possibly to 7B, and it is a little more adaptable of less than perfect conditions. I had one that did quite well for a few years until my rosemary plant overtook it. But it was quite happy there at the edge of the rosemary plant, because I think the rosemary plant was keeping the site quite dry, which it certainly appreciated, and even shaded it a little bit from the heat, the highest, warmest heat in the afternoon. But eventually the rosemary overgrew it. So this is one you may have, and it may be blooming, or you may have the hybrid, the Italian oregano or Italian marjoram. And then last of all, I've already kind of alluded to these ornamental oreganos. These are Oreganum laevigatum, the species, and there's quite a few cultivars available. And I think generally it's called ornamental oregano because it does have such a long flowering season. And as we were just mentioning, the flowering tends to reduce the flavor in the foliage. So even though the leaves on these are edible, they aren't particularly grown for that culinary use just because they do bloom so long. So the leaves are not optimal as long. But you might want to taste them and see what you think. I grow the first one, the one up on the top right, Pilgrim, which is quite a pretty perennial plant that kind of has relaxed stems, is the way I'll say it. They grow up and then they kind of lean over a bit. If you had it in against a retaining wall or in a container, it would tend to kind of drift over the side. It is actually a hybrid, so it's a hybrid between the ornamental oregano and the common or culinary oregano. And it's still blooming in my yard. It's actually the plant I'm going to observe for the Great Southeast Pollinator Census. So it's quite a long bloom period. And the other one pictured here is Herrenhusen, and I just hope I'm pronouncing that somewhere near correct. And as you can see in the picture, it does look quite similar to common oregano. It is more upright. It's 1 to 2 feet tall. And it just blooms for a long time and produces a lot of flowers. There are other cultivars out there. The one thing I will say with if you're looking at other different types of oregano or different cultivars of this species, just check the hardiness zone because some of them may not be hardy for us. But they are great plants, and I encourage you, whether you're adding them to your herb garden or to your perennial border or your pollinator garden, to consider, if you don't already have some type of oregano, adding it both for the pollinators and hopefully next year, if you don't have one to observe this year, it could be something you can observe as part of the Great Southeast Pollinator Census. But again, you can observe any plant, anything that's flowering that pollinators are visiting the flowers. So don't limit yourself, and you can observe multiple plants if you'd like, and upload multiple counts for the pollinator census. But you are welcome. You can learn more about these different types of oregano in the plant toolbox. You can see the different varieties here that are highlighted there, where you can find out more about them. And if you want to learn more about the Great Southeast Pollinator Census, in addition to the whole Southeast website, the gsepc.org, you can go to the North Carolina specific site, which has resources and list events that are going on in North Carolina. So that's listed here on the left side of the slide. That's a great resource. You can start there. And this is a site Amanda has created and maintains. It links you to everything back on the Southeast site as well. So this would be a great place to start. And then we do have some specific information about participating in the Great Southeast Pollinator Census as a statewide Extension Master Gardener activity. That is on the EMG intranet. So you can learn more about that, particularly if you're participating, how to report those hours. And there's some other resources and things linked there as well. So hope everyone will take part in that this weekend. And just a few other announcements as we finish things off today. First, if you want to stay up to date and get announcements and reminders as they occur, please sign up for our Google group, our Extension Master Gardener Google group. This will give you more frequent reminders and updates and kind of breaking news type announcements than the newsletter. We do have our quarterly newsletter that everybody automatically receives, but this Google group you actually have to sign up for. So you'll need to sign up for that online to start getting those more frequent announcements. And types of things you'll get on announcements about include the International Master Gardener Conference, which is actually coming up next week, and it is virtual. And you have today and tomorrow still to register, so you haven't missed out. And they have an amazing lineup of speakers. So really hope, if you haven't already registered, you won't miss out on this opportunity, and go ahead and get registered by tomorrow. We have a couple of exciting continuing education opportunities coming up for Master Gardener volunteers, starting with September the 18th at 1 o'clock. Will Woodham with Extension IT is going to join us to talk about AI tools. best practices and applications that we can use in extension for consumer horticulture education and outreach. So we hear so much about AI these days, and that's just a resource that's building for us. So Will's going to talk about extensions policies and guidance on using AI and give some tips for using it and recommendations of some of the tools that are out there. Really hope you can join us. Of course, it will be recorded, so if you can't join us live, the recording will be available. We also have a really exciting Learn, Grow, Share Showcase webinar coming up October 1st. This will be at 10 o'clock, and it's going to feature lifelong gardening, which is a curriculum that several counties are now offering. It started with Buncombe County and also with Haywood County, taking a curriculum that was developed by Master Gardener volunteers in Wisconsin, adapting that for North Carolina, expanding it, and it really features how we can all garden and continue to garden over our entire lifespan through use of things like adaptive tools and just garden design to make our landscapes easier to maintain so we can spend more time enjoying them. So I don't know anybody of any age who wouldn't want to do that. So it really is for people of all ages. And we are going to be hearing from Master Gardener volunteers and agents in Buncombe County, Chatham County, and Wake County who are going to talk about how they are delivering this curriculum in their county. That is also listed on the Extension Master Gardener Internet and will be recorded. So the recording will be posted as well. And then, of course, another call out for the Great Southeast Pollinator Census. There have been a couple of great webinars over this last month. If you missed them, the recordings are posted. There was one that Matt was part of that was absolutely excellent with tips for insect ID that particularly talked about the insects that are featured in the census that you will be looking for on the counting sheet. So if you haven't seen that one, or if you want a little refresher to get ready for the census, it is posted, and we'll be sure to include the link on the resource doc that will be for today's recording. Also, just last week, the Knowledge is Pollinator Power was an exciting webinar where we heard about some different research projects and ways that scientists are studying and protecting pollinators, including we heard from Hannah Levinson at NC State about the research that Master Gardener volunteers in quite a few counties helped with related to determining how to maintain perennials and manage your perennials so that the stems can provide habitat for stem nesting pollinators. All right, again, this is just the link to the Great Southeast Pollinator Census in North Carolina. So those North Carolina specific resources, including links to things like the counting sheet and everything you need to know. So this is a great place for all you need to know to participate, particularly from North Carolina. And last, just a few more, just a reminder, the Gardens, Lawns, and Landscapes online courses. The next course in the series will start September 1st, and it's a very exciting one that generally people have a lot of interest in landscape materials and design. So you still have time to get registered. Of course, Dr. Scott Zona leads those courses, and there is a discount for Master Gardener volunteers that you can learn more about how to register and everything you need to know online on the Extension Gardener website. Get the words right. All right, so we appreciate you joining us today and everybody who contributed images that made today's webinar so exciting and such a wonderful learning opportunity. Everything you need to know about plants, pests, and pathogens is on the EMG Internet, the North Carolina site, and you can go there and find the recordings and the resource documents and the schedule and pretty much everything you need to know to participate. We look forward very much to seeing you next month, September 23rd at 10 o'clock, where Dr. Michael Rieskind will be joining us to talk about smart mosquito control. So especially thinking about managing mosquitoes while also protecting pollinators in the home landscape. So we look forward to seeing you then.
All right. Well, we'll